Hello folks, are you ready to learn about equalizers? Now what an equalizer is it's kind of a curve that either raises or lowers the volume of audio at specific points in a spectrum. So just saying it is kind of hard to understand what I mean, but let's use this snare for example. I'm just going to make like a little pattern here. Actually, we could have done this. Fill each 4 steps, right? Way easier. Sometimes I just click it in. But anyway, this is track 4. So we're going into the mixer and we're going to go to track number 4. You see that? That's where it corresponds. And you can actually you can send this to a track and it automatically names it, but it's not super important. So if you're wondering why this plugin folder might look different than yours, it's because I was having an issue with my plugin, so I have to look at it in this way. And if anyone else has that issue, then I'll have to provide the fix I used, because it was quite tricky. Looking for the fruity EQ here. There it is, parametric EQ2. Find this, it'll probably be way easier for you to find it. So you get that in there. Now it's in track 4, or not. Oh, what did I do? I probably like double clicked it and screwed something up. Anyway, we want to run this though. There we go, double click it, appears. I'm not used to dealing with plugins in that way, but I had the issue. I could probably restructure it. It's an issue with plugins database. They're still working out a few kinks, but you know, they'll be fixed, absolutely. But anyway, let's look at this. If we play the track here, and just for your ear's sake, just in case, I'll turn this down. So if we play the track here, you see this? The strength of the lines says how much content each frequency band has. Like, so there's a concept called hertz, which is the amount something oscillates per second. So let's say you have like a chain and you're shaking it up and down, right? It makes kind of a wave pattern. So if you're shaking it and then 2 times every second it goes up and down, that is 2 hertz. Now, these make a sound when they're transmitted into the air. So that's why plucking strings will do this. It moves the air in the way that the string moves at different frequencies. So as you go up, once you hit 20 hertz, it enters audibility for humans. So if the air is a longitudinal wave, you don't have to know about that really, but it's a pressure wave. That's what sound is. If it's oscillating 20 times per second, we can hear it. Below that, maybe we can feel it if it's loud enough, but it's not within the range of our ears. But then we go all the way up to 20K, which means 20,000 hertz. So 20,000 oscillations every second is the limit of human hearing. And it's also what MP3s cut off at. They don't go beyond 20,000 hertz. So that's the range of human hearing, and everything in between. Those and everything in between are right here. Actually, it cuts off at 35, but you know that other frequencies are beyond there. But that's what this is, and it's laid out in a logarithmic graph. Again, you don't have to know about that. This is just how it is. So, now you're wondering, what do we do with it? What we do, play this. See, it doesn't change much, but you see there's lines here, right? And you can hear a slight difference in sound. You got a bit more low-end content. You take this, it has a bit more bite to it, especially if you leave that peak. And if we change the bandwidth, it forces it up at number 2. And this is the fundamental frequency that gives the snare its sort of sound. So what we often do with EQs, especially for things like snares, is we want to get rid of the bass content. Because if the snare has bass and then the kick has bass and bass has bass and blah, 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 they all just mix together and cancel. You know, if a high point of a wave and a low point of a wave meet, they cancel, just gone. And that happens when you have a whole bunch of conflicting masking frequencies. So you want to go through every track and make sure that everything is EQ'd correctly. And I'll teach you how to do that. But first I want to get into what the EQ actually is. So first I'll show you the power of the EQ, how much you can change the sound. Hear that? Kind of sounds bad. Sounds even worse. It's all about having a balance. You don't want to do this. You don't want, like, this is what the bandwidth does. That's what was happening here. This is just the last one on the list. It changes the severity of the curve. So this one is a curve that affects like everything, right? Really gradual curve. And the more you tune in the bandwidth, the more you get everything else. Now I hate the snare sound. I hate it. It's the stock snare sound, and it's never good. It's always really, really crappy. So what we want to do, give it a bit more balls. So here that like kind of punches more. It's because I've spiked it at the fundamental boom sort of sound. I've spiked it at the higher fundamental, like where you hear the actual kind of snap, the high-end crackle. So I make kind of like mountains there, and then I cut off sharply on the bass so it doesn't conflict with anything else. And the difference we hear, that's normal, really flat, just sounds kind of like someone blowing into a microphone while hitting a drum or something, like a toy drum. Then we hit this. There you go. This one slams, right? That's the beauty of an EQ. And you don't have to just copy this if you understand the concepts behind this. Like, let's say this is pretty parametric EQ2. You don't need any other EQs, really. This is everything you need. It's all I use. It's really quite good. But let's go to this. Number 7. It doesn't have a dip. It only has a dip this way because like these ones all meet in the middle, right? This one doesn't have anything continuing past it. It doesn't have any other point beyond it. So it just raises or lowers this slope infinitely, right? Same with the number 1 here. So if we move the 7, we can make everything really harsh because this is the high end, right? And again, all of these, we just move them around, change these settings here. The one on the bottom, the one on the top just changes the position on here. If you move it forward, like for instance, you see that? I'm changing this little thing here, the top one underneath the purple, number 1. If you move it, it changes where things are. But it's good about there because you can really just get the punch of the snare, right? And that really is, like, hear that difference? Blowing in a microphone while hitting a toy drum and kick-ass heavy snare, eh? All coming from this kind of shitty preset. That is the power of EQ. You can change whatever you like. And in fact, just for whatever's sake, for teaching's sake, I'm going to EQ each part of this. 4 steps. We'll interface the claps with the snares. Let's hear what that sounds like. Sounds awful. Now without turning on, it really does. It sounds really terrible. Without turning anything off, we're going to go in here, find parametric EQ again. So this is the hi-hat, right? What we want to do is take this down, change the bandwidth. We don't have to change it too much because then it spikes too much, right? And then we slide this until all that's left are the high frequencies you want. And it should be about this bright. So let's hear the difference. Again, it has like uncanny quality of someone blowing in a microphone. And this one sounds a bit more like a hi-hat, you know? Maybe this one. You want to find just the right balance, but you also don't want to spend too much time on it. So that's good. Next we move on to the kick. Trying my best to make these really crappy presets sound decent. So you see, a kick is like in the whole spectrum. That's no good. You know, a kick that's in the whole spectrum is just going to muddy up everything. Don't know what people are thinking if they do that. But first, you want to cut off the sub bass. Probably in your track, you're going to have a sub bass, right? Next, find your fundamental. Where do you want it to smack? You know, where do you want it to hit? Here it's hitting down low. Here it's like not even hitting. It's really between like 150 at the max, usually. You get above that and you're kind of getting a snare territory. Here it sounds decent, but really you want to have your peaks a bit lower down. Maybe around between 100, 150, maybe 90. It really depends on the genre. I'm not really saying it confidently here because it depends on the song as well. Just whatever you think it calls for. I'm liking it right there around 100. Next week we gotta stop this kick from interfering with everything. You hear everything's muddy? If we take that away, do you hear the difference? Here I'm just annoyed. It's like a mosquito buzzing in my ear, but not anymore. Now the hi-hat has room to breathe, right? Next thing we can do is go to the snare that we so carefully tuned. So around 157 hertz is where our fundamental for the snare is, right? And then up at like 7,500, 7,200. So what we want to do is go back in here and see if we can severely make number 3 really, really narrow. You see? And we want to make a dip so the snare cuts in here. Kick can have its own territory, right? Oh, there. I see it's like a heavy kick now. Kicks are supposed to have like little clicks in them though, so people without subwoofers can still kind of hear what the hell's going on, right? So what we want to do is to make another really sharp bandwidth somewhere. So kind of like someone knocking on a table. That's decent, around 2000. It's kind of a wide thing, and yeah, you know what I mean. But as you can hear, everything's sounding way better. The clap still sounds like garbage, so we got to change that around. So as you can see, it's just this mess. They don't need this. Like, just listen. You hear how like the kick is changing when I change this, right? The character of the entire beat is changing because the frequencies from this really shitty clap are like messing up everything, you know what I mean? You want to make this clap is too low. It doesn't sound like a clap at all, right? So